you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat holds talks with former Prime Minister Saad Hariri in the Saudi city of Jeddah on the latest developments in Lebanon and the region. Damascus denies accusation it is behind twin-car bomb attacks, which left at least 46 people dead in a Turkish town near the Syrian border. And former Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif claims victory in general elections. Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat has held talks in Saudi Arabia with former Prime Minister Saad Hariri. This is according to LBCI television, which did not disclose the details of the discussions. However, Al Nahar Daily says Jumblat made a surprise visit to the kingdom in order to address the latest developments in Lebanon. It added that consultations with Saudi officials will tackle efforts to form a new government in light of indications that Prime Minister-designate Tamam Salam will announce a cabinet lineup soon. Daily says Salam will refuse to grant any political camp veto power to the March 8 alliance, which had been demanding it. The head of the Mustaqbal bloc, MP Fuad Sanyura, has slammed Hezbollah chief Said Hassan Nasrallah's speech, saying it has taken Lebanon on a new and dangerous track. In a statement, Sanyura said Nasrallah has steered Lebanon towards the conflict in the region. He added Nasrallah was supporting the Syrian regime at Iran's behest because it wants Hezbollah to serve as a base for it in Lebanon and the region. The MP also criticized Nasrallah's excuse that the party was taking part in the fighting in Syria in order to protect Lebanese people residing in Syrian villages. Sanyura said Nasrallah's actions were jeopardizing, not protecting them. Moreover, he predicted the Hezbollah leader's stances will affect Prime Minister-designate Tamam Salam's efforts to form a new government. Deputy Speaker Farid Makari says he has dim hopes for upcoming electoral discussions and expects Parliament to extend its term after it fails to agree on a new electoral law. In remarks published in a Nahar newspaper, Makari said this session could end with extending the Parliament's term for 6 months to a year. Parliament is scheduled to convene this week for several days of discussions on crafting a new electoral law to replace the one in effect, an amended version of the 1960 law. Current proposals, including the sect-based Orthodox law, are strongly opposed by some of the nation's major political parties. Speaker Nabih Berri said the Orthodox gathering proposal, which only allows for voting within sects, will be the first item on the agenda. Protesters have gathered at the Chamber of Commerce in Tripoli in protest against visit of Iranian envoy to Lebanon, Ghazanfar Roknabadi, who had already left by the time the protests began. Protesters said to Treasurer of the Chamber, Tawfiq Dabbousi, that they were against Iran's support of the Syrian regime. However, Dabbousi explained that the sole objective of the visit was for agricultural and business purposes. The gatherers then burnt a Hezbollah flag in front of the chamber's entrance. March 8 politicians have sent warning messages to Prime Minister-designate Tamam Salam against forming a government without them, saying such a move would plunge Lebanon into crisis. Hezbollah MP Hassan Fadlallah warned that the consequences of forming a de facto government, or one with only March 14th supporters represented, could be unbearable, describing such a move as a dangerous game. Salam's efforts to form a new government are ongoing as he held consultations with President Michel Sleiman and Progressive Party Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat. In remarks to Al Nahar Daily, his editors said that he will not wait forever to form a new cabinet. Observers monitoring the government formation process said the situation was very critical, with discussions focusing on the positive and negative results of Salam forming a government before the May 15th Parliament session aimed at adopting a new electoral law. The Grand Blue campaign has taken place in Lebanon in a bid to clean the seashore and seabed. Over 6,000 volunteers, mostly school pupils, college students, members of sport and scouting clubs took part in the Mopping Up campaign in Rauche, Beirut. Boats, divers, Red Cross, civil defense and environmental NGOs were working round the clock and as best as they could to remove surface and underwater garbage accumulated on the city shore and sea bottom. Grottos and sea slopes were reportedly cleansed in the process. Government, army and security top brass were also present. Certain sections have been allotted to the Lebanese military to clean, while the Nauda sector became UNIFIL peacekeepers' responsibility. Walk With Us Association program and Reverte cleaned the seashore extending between Rauche and Ramlat al-Baida. So Clean took care of recycling garbage collected during the campaign. Brigadier General Abbas Ibrahim has traveled to the Syrian capital of Damascus to discuss a list of demands from rebels holding the 9 Lebanese pilgrims held hostage. The rebel group, located in the Aleppo district of Azaz, wants the Syrian regime to release dozens of female detainees in exchange for release of the Lebanese who were abducted last year. Ibrahim has received a list of the names of the detainees the group wants released. The national news agency reported that Ibrahim, head of general security, traveled to Damascus through the Masna border crossing East Lebanon. Government officials say their hopes of bringing Lebanese home have increased in recent days after Ibrahim, who was tasked to follow up on the case with the Syrian leadership, reported progress in negotiations. Damascus has denied accusations it was behind twin car bomb attacks that left at least 46 people dead in a Turkish town near the Syrian border, as Ankara arrested 9 people in the probe. The attack was the deadliest to hit Turkey since the Syria conflict began 2 years ago and apparently provoked a backlash against Syrian refugees as dozens of Syrian cars were wrecked by what local people said were rampaging crowds. Yumna Naufal reports.
Turkish authorities have detained 9 people after twin car bombings which killed 46 in the Turkish town of Reyhanli near the Syrian border. Interior Minister Muammar Guler told a news conference that the attacks on Saturday were carried out by a group known to the Turkish authorities and with direct links to Syria's Mukhabarat intelligence agency. Deputy Prime Minister Beşir Atalay said all 9 people detained are Turkish citizens. Turkey accused groups supporting the Syrian regime of carrying out 2 car bombings that killed at least 46 people and injured dozens in a border town. The blast occurred on Saturday in a crowded area of the small town of Reyhanli in the southern Turkish province of Hatay, just a few kilometers from the main border. Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said Turkey reserved the right to take every kind of measure after the attacks. He also said it was not a coincidence that the bombings occurred as international diplomatic efforts to solve the Syrian crisis were intensifying. Davutoglu added that those behind the bombings were believed also to have been behind an attack on the Syrian coastal town of Banias a week ago, in which fighters backing Assad were reported to have killed at least 62 people. The Syrian information minister denied responsibility for the Turkish blast, saying that Turkey was indirectly responsible. Ban Ki-moon, the UN chief, and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry both strongly condemned the bombings, with Kerry saying that the U.S. stood by its ally, Turkey. The key opposition group, the Syrian National Council, also echoed Ankara's accusation that supporters of President Bashar al-Assad's regime were behind the bombings. The bombings increased fears that Syria's civil war was dragging in neighboring states, despite renewed diplomatic moves towards ending 2 years of fighting in which more than 70,000 people have been killed. Ankara is a member of NATO, and it distanced itself from its former ally Syria soon after Assad launched the crackdown on pro-democracy protests. Ankara has since become a rear base for the Syrian opposition, and the regime in Damascus has already been blamed for previous attacks on Turkish soil. The United Nations estimates Turkey hosts at least 326,000 Syrians forced to flee the conflict in their country.
Coming up next, British billionaire Richard Branson struts his stuff as an AirAsia flight attendant. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. Syrian rebels have freed 4 Filipino UN peacekeepers whom they had captured on the ceasefire line between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights last week. The rebels from the Yarmouk Martyrs Brigade say they were holding the soldiers for their own safety after clashes with Syrian government forces had put them in danger. A rebel spokesperson said the 4 were handed over at a border checkpoint called Beit Ara this morning, in an area where the Jordanian and Israeli borders join with the Golan Heights. Reporters say they have been handed over in a spot in the Yarmouk Valley. Philippine Foreign Minister Albert del Rosario in Manila confirmed that the 4 had been released and appear to have suffered no harm. Moving on to Yemen, police raided a house in the southern city of Aden, killing 1 suspected al-Qaeda militant and arresting 3. An official said that the cell was plotting attacks on vital installations. 3 other suspected members of the cell were arrested, and police seized dozens of explosive belts. The officials added that the cell had been planning attacks on strategic installations in Aden. Al-Qaeda was driven out of most of its strongholds across Yemen in an army offensive backed by U.S. drone strikes last year. The militants have withdrawn to mountainous regions in several provinces, and although weakened, they still managed to launch frequent hit-and-run attacks on police and army officers. Former Pakistani PM Nawaz Sharif has claimed victory in general elections. Projections based on partial results suggest a big lead for Mr. Sharif's Muslim League PMLN party. Saturday's election saw a large turnout and should pave the way for the country's first transition from the elected government to another. The details in the following report.
As results from Pakistan's landmark election continue to trickle in on morning, questions remain about whether the new government will solve the country's problems. After 14 years out of power, Nawaz Sharif is poised to become prime minister again. Sharif said on Saturday his Pakistan Muslim League party, Nawaz, was the clear winner in general elections and that he hoped for a majority to avoid a coalition. He inherits a country with a dizzying array of troubles, from chronic power cuts to a Taliban insurgency. One resident said the responsibility now lies with the Nawaz League to fulfill its campaign promises. In Karachi, election posters hung in the streets with only thin traffic as residents and campaign workers watched the election results on TV. One newspaper headline read "The Tiger Roars Again," referencing Nawaz Sharif's campaign symbol. Sharif, who vows to bring in free market enterprise and ease economic controls, says speedy growth is the only answer for nuclear-armed Pakistan, a strategic U.S. ally. Although the election marked the first time that a democratically elected government replaces another democratically elected government, the military still makes decisions on foreign policy and security matters. The elections were a landmark, marking the first time an elected government will replace another, and many hoped it might also break the hold of dynastic politicians in a country struggling with years of misrule and corruption. Despite pre-election violence and attacks on Saturday that killed at least 17 people, millions turned out to cast a ballot. The run-up to the election was marred by a series of attacks targeting politicians and their supporters. 29 people were reportedly killed across the country on Saturday, but voting proceeded peacefully at a majority of the 70,000 polling stations.
And now for news around the world in brief. Bulgarians began voting in an election forced by protests over poverty and corruption, with expectations of a close result that could leave the poorest EU country without a working government. The rightist Third Party, which resigned after violent demonstrations in February, is running neck and neck with the Socialists. Her pledges to keep debts under control, while the Socialists say they will spend more and create jobs. The last time a socialist government was in power, between 2005 and 2009, Bulgaria went through a credit boom, bust, and deep recession. A grand farewell party was held at Madrid Zoo in the capital city of Spain to say goodbye to twin male pandas who are scheduled to travel to China on May the 17th. The cubs are the first of their species to be born in Spain since 1982 and only the third litter to be born in Europe. Animal Zoo staff prepared bamboo for the 3-year-old brothers. Children dressed in panda costumes expressed their best wishes by drawing pandas, playing games, and flying white-black balloons. In the U.S., 3 children were reported safe after a tense 36-hour standoff between an armed man and police ended in Trenton, New Jersey. The suspect took multiple hostages on Friday, which prompted the evacuation of nearby homes. Police officials announced that the situation had been resolved and that the suspect, who has yet to be identified, had been taken into custody. Police have not released any details about how the standoff ended or if there were any other hostages. British billionaire Richard Branson strutted his stuff as an AirAsia flight attendant, complete with fishnet stockings and figure-hugging red pencil skirt. His start turned on the flight from Australia's Perth to Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur came after he lost a Grand Prix bet with Malaysian budget carrier founder. Virgin boss Branson agreed with AirAsia chief executive Tony Fernandes in 2010 that whoever's Formula One team finished their debut season lower would serve as a stewardess on the other's airline. The British tycoon came off worse after the Virgin ended 12th in the World Constructors' Championship, 2 spots behind Lotus. Though he kept his trademark beard, he shaved his legs to show them off in black fishnets beneath his red AirAsia uniform. AirAsia donated part of the money from ticket sales from the flight to a children's charity in Australia. This marks the end of our bulletin for today, and now for a reminder of our headlines. Jumblat holds talks with Hariri in the Saudi city of Jeddah on the latest developments in Lebanon and the region. Damascus denies accusations it is behind twin car bomb attacks, which left at least 46 people dead in a Turkish town near the Syrian border. And finally, former Pakistani PM Nawaz Sharif claims victory in general elections. Those are your Sunday headlines from Future TV, live from Beirut. I'm Linda Tamim, and I'll see you again next week. Have a great weekend.